For when we leave anger or fear unsupervised in our hearts, and we don't find a healthy way to release it, it begins to turn. As I say to my students, anger is like that old box of Chinese food in the back of the refrigerator. If you don't purge it, it will turn rancid. And anger turns to hate. There's something of the quality of the resurrection that resides in this holy bravery itself. Did you know that the most common commandment in the Bible, the one that appears most frequently, is do not be afraid? I mean, it's there hundreds of times, and in every conceivable situation. I could rattle off a litany of major biblical figures who were greeted Because the